Why, the POS of A was a pretty good organization here in town during those years. Were you a member of that?
Yes, I was. I was 16 years old when I was admitted to the POSA Lodge. It was a strong lodge. It had a couple of hundred members.
What were some of your activities in the
Well,
lodge?
we one of the things that we always saw that each school had a flag. The lodge donated flags to the schools, and we were very attentive when parades. We'd go out for all the parades.
Get dressed up in your regalia.
We had regalia with a sort of a sash across our shoulder.
And a badge.
It said POSA Lodge on it.
Yeah, and then you also have a badge that was a two-faced badge.
Yeah.
The one was red, white, and blue, and then the other side was black for funerals and so on. Were there any? Did you do anything that you remember that was interesting or unusual?
Well, each winter, during the winter season, where there wasn't much activity here, why the POSA Lodge would put on a supper, a chicken and waffle supper, and you could buy your supper for 25 cents for children and 50 cents for adults. And they also would put on a home talent play during the winter months.
Were those intended for fundraising activities?
Fundraising, yeah, and for entertainment too.
Sure, for the community. Well, that's darned interesting. Now, we know that you mentioned your father, but what we didn't mention was what your father did for a living. He was quite a businessman.
Well, my dad was a painter and a paper hanger, and he also was an undertaker, and he followed that trade up until the motorized hearse came into existence, and then he quit.
Where did he conduct his business?
Well, he was in partnership with Jacob Bingham, and they had this building is still standing where Marion Stover is, a little shop to the side of the house, the east side of the house, and that was where they kept their equipment and they conducted their business.
Now,
they didn't. When anybody died, why they would lay them out in their own home, and put them on display there. Now, one thing that they did that they don't do anymore is when somebody died, they would put up a wreath, a black wreath for an adult and a white wreath for a child, you know, and that people know when they come around that somebody was dead in the house.
So the body was brought down to the shop for preparation?
No, they did it. They prepared them in the home. They only kept their equipment there.
Oh, I see.
And their coffins. Now, for children, the coffins were homemade, and of course, for adults, they were bought.
But the paper hanging and other business?
That was a sideline. Now, he also refinished buggies and automobiles for the Kearnses, and he did the same thing for Bickle, buggies and carriages. He would refinish them.
We have an ad from a 1912 school census that I believe your father was in, where he mentioned that he was in the papering business and the painting business and the undertaking business. All three were mentioned, and that's in our possession in the Historical Society, so meeting the son of that businessman certainly will add interest to that particular ad. Now, the house that you're presently living in wasn't always here, but yet it wasn't precisely built either. From what I understand, the Spake Foundry, which is in our Picture Album of the Past Historical Society booklet, the Spake Foundry was up on the corner of Chestnut and Center Street.
That's right.
Yeah. And the house that's there now was the front part of the foundry.
That's right.
And the rear part of the foundry was moved down here. And became, with remodeling and what have you, the house you're living in now.
That's right.
Do you have any idea when that was done?
That was done in 1910.
And who originally owned this?
Clint Zerby. He built the foundation here, and then he moved the house down. They rolled it down from up there. It took several days to roll it down.
There's quite a few houses in town that were moved from one location to another.
Oh, yes, back in those days they did that.
Yeah, and really, we don't have the time this evening to go into that, but it's just for future generations to know that that was done. Also, 10 years ago, we had an opportunity to chat about several interesting things in Beavertown, and one of the most fascinating things that you shared with me was the activities around the Central Hotel. And of course, that was built by Dr. I.D. Conrad in 1869 and opened for business in 1870. But just this evening, you shared a couple of other interesting things that occurred which I hadn't heard of before. Perhaps you could sort of go over some of those interesting things.
Well, back when this happened when Conrad, of course, was in the business yet. It's beyond my time. It's a hearsay story as far as that is concerned. But my father told it to me, and I would assume it's correct. But anyways, there were peddlers would come around, and they would canvass the town and selling their wares, and they would stay at the hotel at night. And of course, this peddler was a Jew, and he was rather progressive. He did good business, and he put up at the hotel, and they had a hostler there. He was a Civil War veteran, and he was quite a character. He was rather rough, and native of the town. Also worked at the hotel, and during the night, this man, Nace Reed was his name, heard this commotion outside of his door, and so he peeped out the crack, and he saw them dragging a man down the hallway. So next day, they never saw the peddler anymore, and then all was rumored said that they throwed him in the well and covered the well shut. And I know that the well was covered shut later in my life. I know the well was covered shut, and the outline was still visible when I was a boy.
Now, where was this?
Well, that was up. I won't mention the name because there's people still living, and I wouldn't want to have a scandal started.
But where was the well located?
Why, on Sassafras Street.
Sassafras Street. And then that well was covered up, and
They
the
never
people
used it anymore, and they carried the water after that. They
the
always
people
carried.
living in that house carried the water
Yep.
from another source,
Yep.
even though it was a good well.
Yep.
How about some other incidents there?
Well, I'll tell you another thing they did. What happened there was a man got killed, a fellow by the name of Raymer. He was a handyman, and he would clean up. He was in the bar room, and a salesman was there, and he got some change out of his pocket, and a dime dropped in the spittoon. And he told him, he said, "You can have the dime if you have the spittoon." So this Mr. Raymer, he was rather excited.
Mentally retarded.
Mentally retired. He was excited, and he crossed the railroad track in front of the hotel to go over to the other side where there was a gutter, and he was going to empty it. And while crossing, he didn't pay attention, and the train was shifting, and the cars hit him and killed him.
Poor fellow was going to get a dime, and
he got killed.
and got excited.
And another thing that transpired there was whenever there was a funeral and anybody had any prestige at all, or wealth rather, they would always hold their funeral dinners there, and they would always attract a large following.
Well, there was quite a bit of commotion there. I guess the iron ore workers stayed there, and lumbermen stayed there.
When Bud lumbered off the place, they had all the rooms were filled. When Bud lumbered off the mountain, the Shade Mountain.
Yeah, and there was a lot of commotion.
Oh yeah, there was a lot of rough stuff happened there.
Plus the coming and going of the train and the peddlers and
and
the
salesmen come in there. They would come in there and make that their headquarters while they canvassed the town and the surrounding area.
And they would rent a horse and buggy from the livery.
Right, they had a horse and buggy. They had a livery stable there.
And plus they had horse auctions where they would bring horses in from Illinois. There was just a lot of hubbub and activity, which we don't have today, really.
No.
We're sort of quiet and peaceful by comparison. Now, the Christmas tree that you folks had here was the Christmas tree, the layout under the Christmas tree was so fantastic. And I know we were chatting before. Perhaps we could get your wife in here for just a few minutes and let her share the significance that had for all of us that are still living and to remember it. So perhaps we can just take a break here and get your wife in for a minute or two.
Okay.
Now, we have Mrs. Camp here, and just sort of to give a little background to the folks for future generations that will be viewing this. So what is your name?
Catherine Camp.
And what was your maiden name?
Grease. Catherine Grease.
And where were you born?
In Selinsgrove.
And when were you folks married?
In 1927. What was it? The 29th or 30th of September. I can't even remember anymore.
It was in September 29th or 30th?
It could have been the 29th or it could have been the 30th. I
Well,
don't remember.
where were you married?
In Jersey Shore.
Jersey Shore.
By Reverend Fitzgerald, who used to be a minister here.
In the Lutheran Church, wasn't
Mhm.
that? Uh-huh. And how many children do you folks have?
One,
And who would that be?
Gene Camp.
And when was he born?
On the 4th of April, 1928.
Okay. Now, when he was a little fella, you folks had the most fantastic Christmas set up in all of Beavertown and perhaps all of western Snyder County. In this very room here, you had a tree, a Christmas tree that would reach to your 10-foot ceiling. You had a layout underneath the little buildings, an O-gauge train. It was just sensational. And do you have any pictures or anything of this?
I have some, and I was just upstairs trying to find them, but I don't know where they are. I have to go in the attic and hunt in the box.
Well, listen, if you ever find them, let us know. We can make pictures instantly
Okay.
right on this
Okay.
apparatus we're using
I'll
right
hunt
now.
them. I had hunted them together once before. One of the rose garden, or those of the rose garden and of the Christmas tree, but I don't know where I put the envelope.
Well, we sincerely want to get those because this was sensational, and everyone in Beavertown would have to make a trip down to the camps to see it. And but when did you begin setting? When did you have that? When did that whole institution begin?
Oh, my husband put up a tree before we were ever married. He put it up at home.
Uh-huh.
But then after we got married, he enlarged it. We filled this whole room
Yeah.
with it, with the tree. He put a platform in, and then we would go out and gather moss for the mountains, and we had moss that we put down as grass, and we had he had white stones that he used for the roads. We had a mountain scene. We had falling a waterfall on the mountain. We had a town, and we had a farm scene.
And the train running all
Yeah,
throughout that?
there were two trains. There was a passenger train and a freight train and a trolley that would run.
And then on the tree itself, it was all fully decorated with all sorts of
Yeah.
ornaments
Mm-hmm.
and
Lights.
And in any event, when did the people start coming to see this?
Well, some of the kids started before Christmas.
How long before Christmas did you set this up?
Well, he started the Saturday after Thanksgiving, and it kept him busy to get it set up till the night before Christmas.
Uh-huh. But usually it was on Christmas Eve or Christmas Day that the
Yeah,
majority
well,
of the...
he would work, and he had a regular board, switchboard, where he did we put the switches on, turned the switches on to run this stuff.
Uh-huh.
And then there were street lights. The houses were lighted, and the streets were lighted, and it was just like a little town. And
Oh, I know. It was sensational.
it was all lighted up.